Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
All right, everyone, welcome to today's ASRG webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about ASRG and get some of the legal stuff out of the way. ASRG is a nonprofit organization founded to support the development of the automotive security industry. We have developed a platform and a community to share knowledge, communicate through networks, and to build value with collaboration. This is a community for you, built by you, with the goal to protect our friends and family when using automotive products. If you want to learn more about ASRG or get more involved, please visit our website at www.asrg.io or send us an email at hello@asrg.io. Before we jump into the presentation today, let's get some of the legal stuff taken care of. The views and opinions expressed in this webinar are the views of those that have made them. They do not represent views or opinions of ASRG and are to be considered as informational. The use of this information is to be used by the individual and/or organization at their own risk. All right, we have something interesting for everyone today. Good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's webinar on driving towards dynamic risk management, presented by the Automotive Security Research Group. We're thrilled to have the participants joining us from all around the globe for this critical discussion. My name is John Heldreth, and I will be your host for today's session. Today, the presentation is going to be a little bit less formal than we usually make in webinars. We want to talk about the real things that matter, get a little bit into the details, and of course, we can't do that so structured. So today's going to be a little trial, a little interview. We're going to talk about the real things that matter. One of the things, of course, as we all know, we all have the same goal. We're all trying to make sure that cybersecurity is built into the cars, that we all have the same goals. We want to make cars secure for the street because only secure cars can be safe. Only secure cars can protect our data and privacy rights. And today we have the pleasure of having Jonathan and Bastian with us from Itemis. So thanks for being here with us today, guys. Please go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Great. Sure, yeah, and thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jonathan Mohring. I am the head of our entity, U.S. entity for Itemis, so I'm responsible for all of our U.S. customers. And Basti?
Yeah, my name is Bastian Kruck. I'm a software engineer originally, and now heavily involved with us, developing the product of Itemis Secure. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to see how this is going to turn out now with all these new things that are coming up.
Yeah, Itemis and ASRG have had a long relationship. Mm-hmm. It goes back all the way until the first days that we were having ASRG in Stuttgart in something called the Shack Space, which was a little hacker commune, whatever you might call it. So we have a great relationship. It's very interesting over the years what we've accomplished, including threat catalogs, risk data exchange formats, all of these things working towards more positive security for automotive products. I have to admit, Itemis supports ASRG. I also like to think that ASRG supports Itemis, but officially, Itemis supports ASRG. And we work on these projects, like I said, for threat catalog, risk data exchange, and so on. Basically anything to bring the automotive cybersecurity world further along, more mature. And so basically these guys are dealing with me on a weekly, daily, basis. So you have to give them little props. So, we have so many different challenges in the automotive security industry. and it's just growing so rapidly. There's so many different things going on, and things are maturing differently too. So one of my favorite topics is risk, right? Because risk is the whole reason that we need cybersecurity in products. And, if there was no risk, there's no reason for controls. And so this whole concept of understanding how risk actually works, think about, doing risk for thousands of components a day. We need to start bringing, once we've gotten the basics down for risk management or how to calculate risk, we need to advance this, to do dynamic, automated risk calculation, have feedback loops, understand and have more accuracy of theoretical risk and actual risk. So this is some of the topics that we're going to talk about today. So I think, let's go ahead and begin. I think what's really interesting here is what types of trends are we starting to see with risk management? What's happening in the industry today? What kind of shifts are we seeing? And where's this all going?
Yeah, so thanks, John. And I think I can handle that question. Let me share a slide and just tell you a little bit about Itemis before we get into that, if that's all right.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Did I skip over something? I'm always jumping agenda points.
All good.
Well, you promised to be less structured, so we are.
Already messing it up.
No problem, John. All right, so let's before we get into that question, let me tell you a little bit about Itemis and who we are. So we were founded over 2 decades ago, headquartered in northern Germany, close to Lünen, Dortmund area. We are very, very good at model-based systems engineering. So one of our core beliefs is that the application of model-based systems engineering approaches to an organization can be a game changer. And so the way we typically do this is we implement customized tool chains, model-based tool chains for organizations. We've been doing this for the past roughly 2 decades. The product of a lot of those engagements has been, or one of the many outcomes of those engagements has been learnings related to what makes a very good, very powerful model-based tool for specific domains. So what you see on the left-hand side of the slide are 3 different solutions that Itemis offers, focused on different domains, all model-based. And our secure solution, that's really the solution that's focused on the cybersecurity space. Analyze is focused on traceability, and create, which we won't get into today, that's a state chart tool. But these tools really stemmed out of our learnings over the past 2 years through implementing customized model-based tool chains at large organizations. We work with a lot of automotive companies. About 70% of our business is automotive, as can be seen through some of those icons on the lower part of the slide. We also work with some amazing organizations like ASRG, and also the Auto ISAC to advance important topics in the automotive cybersecurity space.
Jonathan, can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Itemis create, what does MBSE mean?
Model-based systems engineering.
Okay, good.
So we are so deep in model-based that we don't even notice our acronyms, as it seems.
Yeah. Model-based systems engineering. So that's a very high level overview of Itemis, what we do, why we do what we do, and with that, I think we can get into John's question. So let me stop sharing the slide here. And
maybe I repeat the question just quickly because
sure.
I just jumped right over an entire section of the webinar. So what we wanted to discuss here is what we want to know is what kind of trends related to risk management are we seeing in the industry today? What kind of shifts? Where do we think this is going to go? Stuff like this.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on it pretty well at the beginning. You talked about how risk is very dynamic and it's changing all the time, and that's what we're seeing. We're, if you think about sources of change, what affects your risk? What are the inputs to that risk? I break it down into two things. One, the product. So the product is changing throughout the development life cycle. Think software-defined vehicles, think addition of new features, think addition of new functions, think development artifacts like requirements. All that is changing throughout the life cycle of development. And so the risk model needs to be able to adapt to those changing inputs. So that's one aspect, one input that changes. The second thing that changes, and this is more after the product, vehicle system, whatever is out in the market, is on the road, is the environment in which it operates. So think about vulnerabilities related to technologies that you have embedded into your product. Other examples may be there may be VSOC data coming in with anomalies that could give you indications that something's happening. Maybe I didn't account for this specific event or anomaly in my risk model. And so these things, these are all aspects related to the environment in which your product is operating that are changing after the product's in the field. And so having the ability to link those or relate those changing aspects of the environment back to the risk model, that is an important topic, important functionality that we are focused on realizing at Itemis. And so our goal in the dynamic risk management topic is to basically make that process of managing the changing product and managing the changing inputs from the environment as seamless, as integrated, and as automated as possible for our customers.
Yeah, and for the industry as well, right? I mean, even from a method-wise, right? This is also a very big challenge to understand how outputs can become inputs and to have continuously variable calculating systems. So
that's where model-based systems engineering brings a huge advantage.
Yeah, definitely a huge fan of model-based engineering, not only from process, method, and so on, but also cybersecurity risk calculation. Right. But also even think about feedback loops when you're doing design-related activities. I love seeing this the outputs become inputs again.
Yeah.
So, but why is this such a big challenge? This is basically data. I can put this, or why can't I put this in an Excel sheet and do it that way?
Well, you can, and a lot of our customers start that way until they realize that it's actually quite difficult. And I think there was a time when everyone was focused on just meeting type approval, and everyone kind of viewed this risk assessment as a one-time event. But over the course of the past months and even year, many of I think the industry started to realize the risk assessment is not a one-time thing. Risk assessment is an ongoing process that needs to be continually updated and monitored throughout the life cycle of the product. And so in order to have a dynamic risk assessment process that is automated and doesn't take a lot of effort from your organization, Excel typically won't cut it. And there's a lot of reasons, additional reasons I can talk to, like system complexity. Automotive systems are not simple systems. They're very, very complex systems. even the simple systems, when you start to consider variance and all of the inputs that go into modeling these systems, they're not simple. And so using Excel to model these systems, which is the basis of a risk assessment, is typically a recipe for eventual disaster, I'll say. One of the second points is this stuff, as I hit on before, has to be managed throughout the life cycle. A lot of our customers, they want to be able to go back in time and understand at a specific point in time what was my risk and what decision did I make and why did I make it, based on the inputs, right? So that's kind of the life cycle management aspect, and the ability to have like a little virtual time machine to go back and be like, what were my inputs at this time? Why did I make that decision?
There's traceability almost, we collect all this information to make a decision at a certain point in time on the information that we have available to us.
Yep. And traceability comes into play also very, very heavily. We're seeing that also with our customers and within the industry, how important traceability is to being able to have that understanding, not only at one point in time, but throughout the entire development lifecycle, to connect all those artifacts to the risk model to understand all those inputs and outputs over time. So.
Mm-hmm. So like whenever I get called and come into a company that says like, oh, we do our system analysis in Excel, then as a software engineer, I'm like, yeah, so you squeezed all your data into a bunch of linear tables.
Yeah.
So it means lots of those are duplicate. I think I have a better idea than that. And to tease that.
Actually, there is one good thing about Excel tables, right? Like, it is frozen in time. I mean, well, if you save it and you don't accidentally hit backspace, delete whatever, and take out some cell. But I mean, in Excel, you do a risk assessment and then it is fixed, right? And the next minute, it's also not any more relevant to what you were trying to accomplish in the first place. So I think the static risk analysis is good. It's a step in the right direction, first of all. However, it's not timely. You just you shouldn't make decisions based on something that was done months ago, right? When you started the risk assessment in the first place. And because we have such a fast-paced world and the environment in which our products are operating or even not operating yet are continuously changing, so it's not so easy to manage risk in real time,
Yeah.
But so why is this something that we need? I mean, I've talked a little bit, we've discussed a little bit about why we need this, but why do we need this as an industry? Why do we need this as a community? What are some of the use cases that we see that are interesting for the community itself?
Yeah, so there's two use cases that I think I can share, and the one is something we hear more and more from our customers, and that's the whole idea. And again, we hit on it many times, is this idea of being able to dynamically update the risk model. One specific aspect of that is related to vulnerabilities and the ability to understand when a new vulnerability arises related to a technology. How does that affect my risk? So I want to put that vulnerability in the context of my system, so that then I can understand that even though this vulnerability may be of a critical nature, it may not actually affect my risk that much if given the system context, or vice versa, right? You could have a vulnerability that's not of a critical nature, but given the system context, it could actually result in an increased risk, and we need to address it. So that kind of putting the vulnerability in context is something we're hearing a lot from industry, and we as Itemis have started to work with various partners who who provide vulnerability management services to integrate our solutions together, to kind of have a best of breed or best of both world approaches. From our perspective, the system, the risk modeling, and from the partner perspective, the actual vulnerability management solutions. So that's
Jonathan. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Actually, this is a really interesting concept, right? Because you have the design aspect, and then you have vulnerabilities that are affecting potential risk to the vehicle.
Yep.
When it's in the operational status. Have you guys found a way to do this elegantly, or is this still being discussed at a methodology level?
So we are pretty advanced in our integrations with partners already. We have a very structured data model coming out of our system, so it makes it relatively easy for our partners to consume that data because it's so well defined and because it is model based, right? I mean, the objects are defined, the relationships are very well defined. It's a very well defined structure, which I think, and Basti can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that makes it relatively easy for partners to consume and process this information within the context of their systems.
Yeah. So we're still having the model-based DNA here, right? Which means we we take care of a ubiquitous language and a clear idea of a semantically sense-making model, like a data model or database scheme, or how you might say, that makes sense to integrate with other systems. And I think that's a big part of how we do our integrations, to talk about how do entities from these various places and domains and departments and tools, how do these data actually map to each other?
Yeah. And
that's
how can
quite
you
some challenge not to be underestimated.
Yeah, how do you bring it from the theoretical world, right, where you do this in the design phase? You theoretically understand the risk, right? But then once we switch over to the operational phase, then we start to see we have S-bombs, H-bombs, whatever, and we could be affected by these vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. How do you convert the vulnerability through a threat catalog into actual risk? I think this is really the interesting part of that.
And I think it's like reducing the answer to a tiny bit is, let's not redo it all over again and again. If we have the properly structured documents that can, back in the time, some people used to do like a Terra one time conceptually, then one time for the audit, and then they did a Terra for every incident or something, like some kind of risk assessment where they started from scratch or so, and that won't work anymore with that complexity that we're facing here. So having one document and a risk that can live throughout this whole, not just the V model and like the development part, but also the part where it's on the road already. And also, putting this into the audit also and showing these things to the auditor makes sense for the compliance managers who are struggling to match all these things together. And there's so many personas who will need to have a touch point with this particular entity and cannot afford redoing all the work all over again. And I guess that's the core answer I would like to give today.
I'm with you. I think we kind of went in a different direction here, but we'll give it back to Jonathan now, huh?
Sorry for that.
Good. I think in the interest of time, it would be good if we actually went more into your direction, Basti, and talked about the next topic of how does this stuff actually work.
Yeah, I mean, and that was already part of the answer to let's not duplicate our data, right? I teased that already earlier, and one core bit of this is that we might be facing. So before I come to talk deeper into what we're seeing now here, let me rephrase on the high level. There are some data which we don't want to duplicate. Like a typical case for that is the attack steps, and when we rate some feasibility for some component, well, we might be, let's say it's a Bluetooth spoofing attack. There might be different settings where I'm also rating a Bluetooth spoofing attack, and I hopefully come up with a very similar rating if the context is similar. and having this in an Excel file will work for now. But once you are trying to get this updated, for example, because the world has changed and we consider Bluetooth spoofing like a way easier thing to do, how do I come from here to from maybe one incident to update these all these terras, all these Excel files potentially? So just from the theory, obviously we would somehow need to have one place to store these feasibility ratings, and maybe similar with other kinds of informations. So a precondition to make all this work is let's move these data into more of a live database, and which has better APIs than Excel. So we can do proper roles and access management. How do you limit the how do you do access management for a single Excel file where you have catalog data, method configuration data, and the concrete Terra data inside. And then in the end, you would notice that some colleague years ago has accidentally overridden a formula cell with some concrete value, and everything was a mess since then. That we cannot do anymore, right? Oh. So we need proper role in access management for these kind of separate files or databases. We would need also a proper versioning, so to bring in the traceability that Jonathan mentioned. Maybe something like a semantic versioning, right? So that you would increment a particular digit when there is a change, depending on how breaking that change is to the catalog, right? And thinking of this more as being its own artifact, like the attack steps library, for example.
And Basti, Jonathan was talking earlier about, there's two things that change. It's either the product or the environment it operates, right?
Yeah.
And usually, OEMs or suppliers, they control the product change. So as much as the model itself reflects the risk, the product, the damage, and the risk, you can actually if you have a model, you can consistently change the feasibility values, right? And consistently get a new risk out until you change the product. And then you have a new version of the risk assessment, right? Model and so on.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And this is why I love models and the idea of dynamic risk assessment.
Because we need to be able to keep track with these continuous changes in the world, in the environment, and to some extent, I guess, also with the changes relating to the product that is already on the road, but for sure relating to changes of when we release a new vehicle type that is based on an existing platform, right? So maybe we want to, and no, I guess maybe now would be a good point in time to jump into that. Now we're sort of speaking already about that circle, right? Or do you
think about the configuration topic we have in automotive, right? Every VIN number is a different configuration, that probably only shows up a few times. And being able to identify risk with a specific configuration is much easier through model based. Basically, you can load the configuration into it.
We can do variant management. For example, we can also, when we typically we don't start an entire new vehicle platform, but we start from somewhere. So we could consider then, and that's what you see on the top between the blue and green area. Maybe Jonathan can point a little around there. Yeah, up there. We can see how actually when we start a new Terra, we typically don't start from scratch, but we would like to build on the existing models, on the existing risks, to make sure that the things we have learned so far, like our organization has learned, that they are carried over into the next release of this vehicle, to the next iteration of vehicle type. So maybe that's how some of the analysis start, not by copying over a file, but from pulling in the past version of the versions of the risks from past vehicle types, and then we would go into development, right? We would be actually there already iterating on our risks because we keep learning already while developing, maybe just because some things in the technically have changed during development, and we noticed that we want to do some things differently, so we need to update our risk apparently, because if we architecture different, hopefully we also update our analyses so that we can analyze the actual system that we've built, right?
But you can take over as much as possible from your already existing, right?
Oh yes, of course. If it stays the same, why redo the analysis? That's the point. Yeah.
Right, and reusability is something that we also like to do in the automotive industry, not to reinvent the wheel every time.
Mm-hmm. And the good news is we can do that. The bad news is, I think for that you need to let go of your Excels. So that we can have the data like referencing each other instead of copying them all over. Then it won't work anymore. And then already we would have multiple versions of risks, which will work best if we would have like a live API and have these risks in a database. That already plays a big role doing development. And then you can have your test reports reference the risks that had been tested. You can have the compliance manager would be happy if they would actually have this already linked to the items and to the system model, so that when they are sitting in the audit and looking for let's say the risk assessment for this particular headlamp system, they would be able to type it into their search field and find the according documents. And I guess that's like thinking of this as a database where everyone who needs, like the compliance manager, like sitting in the audit, can access these data. I guess that's a key point here.
Yeah.
And let's imagine we passed, like we usually do, and we are releasing this vehicle. It's start of production. It's out on the road, and then we can consider that there is, of course, still things are changing. This time more on the environment's end, starting from then, which means there are 0 days coming out, and we are there's the vulnerability monitors going on, and there are people sitting there and looking at the CVEs, for example. So the whole idea would be that they can also find the risks that a CVE is actually relating to, maybe based on the common platform enumerators or some SBOM, HBOM IDs. Somehow we need to have the system model linked here. And they may already find some gaps in the process, which I heard every company has that, and can find some missing documents that just need to, like, we're missing a particular link or so, or make a small assessment, like a small addition, so that actually it turns out this is not too big of a thing, because if a not very feasible attack, which yields not much impact, has turned a little bit more feasible, maybe there's nothing to do because the risk level stayed at a very low level.
Basti, did I understand that correctly? That you would be able to take the vulnerabilities and directly understand the risk?
Oh, why not? I think if we're speaking about, having the data at hand, if we're having, once we have them moved into being inside of a platform of a risk database, we can actually, I think we can make that happen, that we can, as good as your data are, then of course, and as good as these things have been linked, but of course we can, if we have the technical specifiers of the libraries that are having a 0 day, why not should we be able to show up these particular terrors and these particular risks in them are relating, like are claiming to have that component of that very version installed. So you might need to look at these first. And we can even try to do some bit of recalculation already and have an approximation of how the risk is changing, because we have the CVSS score, and can try to mount it into our risk calculation to come up with a very interesting number then, which gives us a preview of how bad is it.
That's super powerful, I think, right? Because it doesn't matter if you do cybersecurity perfectly. And first of all, there's no perfect cybersecurity. The thing is that you're always going to have vulnerabilities. You're always going to have bugs. It's just that way. We have to accept it. The thing is, we just have to manage the risk, right? And if we can do that dynamically, if we can do that where it's coming through and you can see risk automatically based on vulnerability findings, I mean, that's super powerful.
It would be, yes. It's still, there's manual steps involved, of course, of looking at these and processing what these numbers show then, right? Maybe the vulnerability manager notices like, oh, this is really bad. We got to do something and make some calls, wake some people up and installs like an incident response team who is then needing to open up all the related risks who are affected by this very, very vulnerability. And then they can still make choices to update some feasibility ratings, like in the catalog, as I mentioned earlier, and maybe affect multiple risks to be updated on at once.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is an entire new class of attacks, some kind of fancy new side channel or so, that actually is even more effort to add new, maybe a new model, new attack paths for the individual risks, which would be necessary if that's such a big new thing as we sometimes have seen in security. But the good thing is they would know which risks to touch and which things to extend. And the vulnerability manager in turn can have a good monitoring on how the incident response is going on, so that they can eventually come up with a nice software update, which again, the controls they came up with should actually be updating our risks again, because the control also, they are not always unbreakable, right? So there's again a new risk version of this risk, so that this whole cycle of so many people and workflows touching each other when it comes to the cybersecurity risk can start rolling and be less of a redoing everything. And that's what we try to show here. So the top left is still about when the product is changing, but I think we mentioned that before, right? Then you would actually be also needing to reiterate your risks. Yeah. And that's how, like, the circle of life of a risk, maybe. If you're a fan of Lion's King, then
and I think
you might be a fan of this.
it's really cool, like, to see what type of complexity you have just through the different phases of a product, right? The development, the vulnerabilities, the incidents, product change. These are all the inputs that potentially are creating risk, change in risk. And doing a risk assessment in Excel, you're going to have to manage this. And it becomes a nightmare just doing it for a single asset, right? And think about doing this for a single software version, for a single hardware version. And by most OEMs, we have, hundreds of thousands of different configurations, different software, hardware combinations. Actually, I think Mercedes-Benz at some point said they had somewhere like 2.0 billion different configurations possible for their EE architectures. I mean, it's amazing, but think about the complexity and how much fun it is to manage it.
Let's better get some tool support ready for this.
Well, exactly. So we know the challenge, and Basti, I do have one question for you. We talked a lot about model-based risk assessment, right? And these days we have like all of these, artificial intelligence models, machine learning models, but we're not talking about these types of models, correct?
We're not talking about these types of models at all. We're talking about, I mean, you could say like the data schema, like the shape of your data that is driving the tools that we are building at Itemis, so that we can build the nice integrations and even have them also tailored to the particular OEM's setting. I think for us tool builders in general, that's the challenge also, to understand what the whole industry needs, but still make this being able to suit into the particular, typically quite some unique setting of a process and of workflows that the individual OEMs are having. And the point of having these as in a proper database, like some people would call this like an API or some, or I would call this like a model or a repository, allows us to actually, based on Itemis Analyze, also we have some good, we're in a good shape to build these these integrations that require a little bit of changing the shape of your data, so that wherever the data are coming from, we can understand and link them up. And I think that's the beauty of our model-based approach, that we have that we have the model still at the core of our product.
Yeah.
And these vocabularies.
That being said, we're not focusing on this discussion on AI, but AI is something that the company as a whole is focusing on as one of the additional methods to automate and to make that, dynamic risk management process even easier.
And maybe it could be some assistance for some semi-automated processing.
Right.
They could give good proposals.
Right, exactly.
Well, on the other hand, they are very smart, but are not always right. And when we want to do security, then we probably prefer to be accurate. And that's not what AI is known for, to be accurately right. So we can give good proposals and build great assistance based on it. Yes, we have that in the pipeline too. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. And so we talked about AI a little bit and how it could be a thing, but where's this all going? What's currently being worked on? What will be the focus in 2024, 2025? What do you see as the future of risk analysis?
I think a key thing to note here is, in the mid of this year, 2024, we are having the requirements legally get more strict, because all the produced vehicles need to comply with the regulation 155 in the UN countries. So that means there will be a lot of this need to have components and vehicles that are already being produced. By then, they must also have that type approval of something like the ISO SAE 21434. And for me as a tool vendor, it's an interesting case, because they start to do to enter the process for vehicles which maybe have been developed earlier on, and they're trying to enter this land of having a risk platform while not having the risk, like the modern tooling at hand from the beginning of the whole process. So that's an interesting thing for this year, but maybe only unique. And in a couple of years, they will of course have built all the vehicles already with 21434 in mind from the beginning. So that anyways, it will still be the case that the key is to automate the risk management process, not just linking the systems like I was mentioning, but also inventing and figuring out how do we want to, what's our model of people working with each other, like the mental model. Are they having some kinds of inboxes so that the compliance manager can easily find the data which have been handed in from the security officers somewhere else, and the vulnerability manager, the incident response people, so many different people and workflows which need to somehow interact on basis of this thing. So I think that's an interesting challenge, to build the bridge between these various personas and people. And maybe like a Confluence or so, that's an example for some tool where everyone in the company somehow has a touch points with, and this is like an interface between different people across teams, across domains, priorities, departments, and so on. And I think we will need to build a similar kind of cross-sectional platform to make something to make something like this work. It will be relevant to have these version catalogs that I mentioned, maybe with a workflow that accommodates for contributors and maintainers, as it seems to me, because we have quite some diverse level of experience of cybersecurity in these companies typically, and some things like the catalog, where one change affects many risks, might be important to be reviewed before bringing it in. In general, the review processes, of course, are something we should have good tool support for, and it gets even more important when it comes to the whole vehicle level, where the individual, maybe component-based or system-level kind of terrors need to be brought together, so that again, a different persona. I mentioned this person already, the compliance manager for a vehicle type at an audit for the type approval, they would need to have somehow the full vehicle view, which somehow consists of all the terrors from individual domains, suppliers, and so on. And they even need to know where this comes from, so that when the auditor asks, like, okay, what do you do if there is a 0-day relating to this headlamp ECU? Then you got to be better be able to figure out whom to call and whom to tell to take a look into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's sort of the challenges for now. Let's see what comes after that.
Exactly. I love the topic of automating. We try to reduce the effort, take out the human impact, right? Because usually you have security experts working and bringing in their idea and their knowledge into a risk assessment. And a risk assessment can only be as good as the person that gives it.
Yeah.
And so not only that, but they're bringing in their own opinions, they're bringing in their own experience and everything. So a risk assessment is never going to give us the complete risk picture when it's human-based. And my opinion here, I think we need to get to a point where it's automated and you take out this human factor. Maybe it's in the review process, but more repeatability, more reproducibility, so that you can have a more consistent risk evaluation throughout your entire product base.
Yeah.
And I think model-based is the start of where this can happen.
Oh, yes. So that everyone can contribute to this whole thing, and not an individual person will do it all, but that this is like a something they're contributing to together in the individual ways and processes. And my goal is to actually make it very easy to build the models in a way that they are, very easy to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
Very easy to
hard
do
to
it
do it
dynamic.
wrong.
Huh?
Or very hard to do it wrong.
Make it very hard to do it wrong. Yeah, that's the other way around. Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah.
All right. I can talk about this topic all day long. Right. I think it's really a cool topic. I want to thank you guys for coming together today and talking about where we see this dynamic risk management concept going. I think we're all really interested to see where Itemis is going with this. I mean, Itemis is one of the very good tool providers for risk management and so on. There are others, but I'm really excited to see where this model-based solutions from Itemis are going. Where can people find more information about Itemis or the products that you guys are developing?
I mean, you can, obviously we have a website where we have a good amount of information.
Is the model-based website?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think the website itself is model-based, but there's a lot of model-based information. Yeah, there's a lot of information about model-based solutions on the website. Obviously they can reach out to Basti or myself directly.
To Jonathan, Barry, to Jonathan.
To me? Okay. Then just reach out to me.
Home phone number, please.
Yeah. Very.
I can give you all his phone number. No, and it's also great if you reach out to me. That's fine too, of course.
Great. And so, guys, thank you. I think it's also really important if anyone's watching this webinar and understanding that there's something missing, that you know a different use case, a different feature that hasn't been tackled by tool providers, the industry, whatever it might be, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yes.
We do need this feedback.
Yep.
It's itemis.com, like an item and IS, and after that, itemis.com.
Itemis.com. Perfect. So,
and ASRG.io, is it there?
Yeah, there you go. So you're more than welcome to reach out to us at asrg.io or hello@asrg.io. The inbox comes to us and we'll review it and pass it on, of course. So please stay tuned. We have a lot more of these type of webinars coming in the future, we are doing podcasts, all kinds of different content generation. Basically, we want to talk to the people that are developing solutions or creating the problems in the automotive security industry. And I think the more that we know, the better solutions we can build for the public or for our families, our friends, whoever it might be. But this is a solution, or this is a challenge that we need to do together. And so, gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show today, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you folks. I really enjoy that.
We'll talk to you guys soon, okay?
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. See you.
Bye.